hello, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us from wherever you're dialing in from. We're really excited to host today's session. Hopefully you can all see and hear us just fine. I'll do a quick introduction, a little bit of housekeeping, and then introduce our all-star panel for today's discussion. So first up, what are we here to talk about? As most of you hopefully know, we sent out a survey to a global community of IB coordinators back in January, asking questions about how the ATL framework is integrated in schools, what's working, what's not working, who has examples of best practice that they'd be willing to share. And what we're hoping to do today is dive into those results, pick up on a few of the really key themes, and ideally build a community of IB schools to share best practice, to learn from each other and with each other so that we can build a really fantastic framework going forward. Bit of housekeeping. My colleague Anna is one of the panelists here today. She'll be fielding any questions. We will allow space for a Q&A at the end, but this will be hopefully really fun, really dynamic. So just ask questions as they crop up and we can always pose them to our experts on the panel here today. So don't be shy, jump in with questions as you have them. So let's introduce today's panel. I'll click on this nice Prezi link here and look in. So today we have, first up, Lance King. Lance is one of the founding members of the ATL framework as it exists in the IB. He was at the HQ when this was designed. He runs a company called Lalatat, and he has delivered ATL-style workshops to over 300 schools. 250,000 students have benefited from his wisdom. I'm sure many more, and many teachers, I'm sure, through his workshops as well. I thought I'd lead in by asking each of our panelists, if you were an ATL skill, which one would that be? So Lance, if you were an ATL skill, which skill would you be?
Well, it would have to be failing well. It describes my life really well. I've had two businesses. The first one lasted for 2 years and was a total disaster, and the second one has lasted for 27 years. And it's been a great success. I've been married twice. The first marriage lasted 2 years and was a complete disaster. The second one has lasted 32 years and it's been wonderful. And so it goes on. And so, yes, failing is what I do well. And it was one of the ATL skills that I created when I created the MYP framework. And it's one that I think links directly to academic success.
That's a very candid and authentic answer. I appreciate that. Next up, Javeria Tamim. Javeria is ATL school lead at a very prestigious school in Pakistan. She's also the extended essay coordinator and TOK lead in the school as well. We've spoken at length about her philosophies about lifelong learning. So Javeria, on to you. What would your ATL skill be?
So hi, everyone. Like mentors, like followers. So Lance, I had my, focus on the effective skills, and one of it was to fail well and to bounce back well. But I also want to develop a lot of focus when it comes to my concentration and to control my self-talk also, and to do some positive self-talk. So yeah, those would be my superpowers if I can choose.
Sounds like we've got a diverse panel. I don't think either of those would be mine, but I won't share what mine would be. And finally, we have Chiara. Chiara is the proof in the pudding. She is what the ATLs really should be. 45-point IB graduate, Cambridge graduate, and someone who now goes in to schools to give motivational talks to IB students. So she's obviously on the ground, can see the challenges and the success stories day to day. Chiara, finally to you. If you
So thank you, Tim. I think this was a tricky question. I chose one of the cognitive skills, actually, listening. And, in classroom, that is quite like an easy one, just listening to the teacher. But I think to listen with attention and motivation and just sort of emotion and relate to others, I think that is super important and actually ties in to affective skills as well. So I would say that is my superpower.
Okay, excellent. Please do listen, but please also speak today because we want to hear from you as well as listening. Okay, so let's go back to the main screen here. Oh, sorry, I should have represented that now. Click through our panelists and back to Should have clicked in and had a nice profile picture for each of you. Okay, so let's look at defining the ATLs. Obviously, everyone here today will know plenty about what the ATLs are, but let's just make sure we're all on a level playing field here in terms of our understanding. So as a kind of starter for 10, Lance, maybe I could pass this one over to you in terms of what was the thought process when these ATLs were chosen? And do you think they're as true today as they were at the time that they were designed?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, more so. I mean, ATL skills are just simply the thinking and learning skills that go behind effective learning of all subjects. And so you cannot learn any subject without utilizing some skills, some mental skills. But I hesitate to use the word mental. It's thinking and it's learning. It is cognitive skills, it's affective skills, and it's metacognitive skills. And certainly in an age where information, all the information in the world is available at the fingertips of every person, that it is the skills of doing something with information, processing information, understanding information, being able to do something with information, generating the self-motivation to create projects, to create things out of information. Those are all the skills that make for success in every job, every career from now on. So yes, I think ATL skills are vital and getting more vital day by day.
Yeah, I mean, to that last point, either Chiara or Javeria, if you'd like to jump in, are these skills, why are they so relevant at the moment? Why are so many people interested to take part in a webinar like this? And why are we hearing this acronym over and over and over at the moment?
Okay, so just jumping in from my experience of talking to DP coordinators, I think, as Lance, you mentioned, the skills are everywhere in our education. In the IB, they're present a lot. But as a student, when I was studying the IB, I had never heard of them. It wasn't something present. It was something that was always sort of included within the syllabus, but not explicit. And I think a lot of the DP coordinators I've spoken to, and a lot of the students I've spoken to as well, they feel like they have sort of missed out quite very important years because of the COVID pandemic and joining online. And I feel that they're struggling with the cognitive and actually the affective skills. So I think now they've become more important than ever, in the sense that it's very important to shed light back into them and to bring them back from the invisible to the visible in the schools.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Sorry, Lance, you will.
No, carry on.
So I agree that with this blend of COVID and the absence from physical schooling, it has added a lot to the stress and anxiety in these students, and not only in the students, in the faculty as well. So, that trickle-down effect from the faculty to, handle a student body that has been at homes for almost 2 years, that has added to the, to the plateau, and that has added to the stress levels. So these skills are basically what I always, my mantra is that they are the core of each program. They are at the very center of the entire philosophy of IB education. So, and everything else that is happening in a subject, the subject groups or the learner profile or the international mindedness, they're all at the periphery. And this is the basic crux of the entire IB philosophy. So their importance will never wane off. That is something which is, understood and, established by now. But their need has increased because of the 2 years of COVID. And also what Lance has mentioned, that with information so readily available, the right filters need to be there to process that information. And with this new AI thing, it is all the more important that we should talk about skills where students are mindful of what they are doing and how they are steering towards their academic performances. Yeah.
Well, that's a really good point, and maybe is a nice lead-in to the first of the survey questions. So let's jump into those. So as I mentioned, we sent the survey out to global DP coordinators. We had almost 100 responses, and I've spoken to, I think, 15 coordinators since. And the results are really, really interesting, because there seems to be a very common thread, essentially across all schools. And if we look at the first set of results from the first set of questions, we asked, how well mastered are your students' ATL skills? Apologies, the bottom right one should say DP1. You can see an average there of 5.5 for MYP students and 6.6 for DP1 students. So there's more concern in a school leadership perspective for NYP, but it seems like a relatively high level of concern across both. So maybe Lance, coming back to you, do you think if we'd asked this question 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, would this answer always be the same? Or do you think it's heightened at the moment in a kind of semi-post-COVID world? You're on mute, by the way, so please pop back off mute.
Yes. I'm not sure what the results would have been if you did it a few years ago, but I can certainly say that, you know, I've been working with teachers quite a bit since COVID, and the uniform opinion seems to be that they're now dealing with a unique cohort of students who find it difficult to work alongside other students, who find it difficult to cooperate and collaborate in live groups, who have, in fact, one teacher said to me the other day, she said, my grade 7 students are acting like grade 5 students. It's almost as if they've lost 2 years of emotional maturity. And a lot of that emotional maturity is gained by contact with other people, by learning in a group, by learning in a class, by being present with other kids in the playground, by having to work out all the things that you work out, you know, outside of classroom when you're with a group of children your own age. And these children have missed that. And it's a real challenge to actually catch a child up when they have physically moved on by 2 years, but emotionally not done so. And yeah, it's a huge challenge, and teachers are really struggling at the moment. This cohort will be known as the COVID cohort, and it will be material for academic papers for the next 20 years. It's really interesting to study.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to that later on when we look at the future. Javeria, coming to you, maybe, are you seeing this in your school? Would this reflect your views? Or maybe if you don't want to speak directly about your school, the wider community in Pakistan? Is this a fair reflection?
Yeah, I would talk in a wider, spectrum, not just a particular school, because the issues are common with all, students, whether they are even in IB stream or not, but the issues are same. I feel that the question is about mastering the skills. I kind of do not agree with the data here, because any student or any school claiming that, like, look at the averages, 5.5 or 6.6 are, mastered at these, they have mastered these skills. That is highly unlikely, especially after these 2 COVID years, because, probably they are at novice level, or they are practicing the skills, they are practitioners, they are learning to apply these skills, but mastering these skills is a tall claim. So I don't think so that the schools I have worked with can claim that 50% of their classes or 50% of their student body has mastered a skill. Probably they have started becoming practitioners of one skill, but they are struggling with another. They cannot be at a master level with all 5 skills. But I also want to reinforce the point Chiara has brought up, that most of the students are unaware of these skills. All they know are the 5 umbrella terms of the 5 main skills. They don't know the skill indicators. They are like almost more than 144 skill indicators, and they're always growing. And I have not come across a student or a structured approach in any school where these skill indicators are actually embedded in the classroom. They know that there is one such thing as research skills or self-management skills. They need to manage their time. They know the outline of these skills. But yes, they are not aware with what it implies actually. And hence they don't have the strategies to develop these skills.
Yeah, that certainly seems common across the people I've spoken to as well. Chiara, let's come to you and then we'll move to the next question. You weren't really aware what the ATL skills were, but reflecting on, and reflection is a very correct term to be using in this context. Do you think this would reflected you and your cohort when you graduated? And how relevant do you think the ATL skills that you developed in the IB were when you got to university?
Well, I think they were extremely relevant. And actually looking back and reading through all the skills, I realized that I had actually developed them during the IB, even if they weren't as evident. And to me, they helped me massively when I was at university. And beyond the affective skills and the social skills, I think the cognitive skills as well. Cambridge was very much sort of encouraging students to think critically at all times. The interview was not about like the assessment interview that I had to do to get in was not about how much knowledge you had, but how you could argue a point and how you could structure your answer and how you could think outside the box and be open-minded and bring different perspectives in. And I think that's a skill that the IB trains students in, especially in the humanities, in the arts, in the languages. You're all the time thinking about new solutions and creative sort of solutions to problems. So it definitely massively helped me when I started university, now when I was writing essays and had to bring in these different perspectives. So definitely, I think the ATL skills are extremely useful. But as both Javeria and Lance have mentioned, is this idea of trying to bring them back in and to make students aware that they're using them and that they're there, and to refine them and to strengthen them. Because, sorry, going back to what Lance said, I had exactly the same experience of talking to DP coordinators who said that the year 7 students were struggling with social skills because they had not been in a classroom for 2 years and they behaved like primary school kids when they should be middle school. And the same thing happened, as you mentioned, the sort of COVID cohort. DP2 students that I've spoken to, some of them are really shy and very quiet. And even the DP coordinator said, you know, these are the students that had 2 years of online learning and they're coming up to the exams now very stressed. So there's definitely been an impact in terms of COVID and the ATL skills. But yeah, to circle back, I think they're extremely important.
So I'll skip ahead to this question because you've kind of touched on it a little bit, which is one of the other sets of questions we asked, which is, you know, what's the student's perspective? You know, we've spoken a little bit about how well do students understand the challenge, and it seems like they're essentially saying the same thing. The optic from a teacher's perspective seems to be quite similar to a student's perspective of their own mastery. But if you look on the right-hand side there, it's more about whether schools are concerned. So they're saying it's at a certain level, but is that reason for concern? Overall, it seems like almost half the participants are concerned still in a school context. So, Lance, is there a plaster here? Is there a quick fix, or is this a long-term solution that we need to put in place?
Well, I think that, yeah, with students, I think there is a sales job that needs to be done by teachers. And the way I do it is I say to teachers, what do students have control over at school? You know, do they control who teaches them, or when they're taught, or how they're taught, or who sets the tests, or who marks the tests, or they have no control over any of those factors. And so for some students, that brings about a feeling of helplessness. So what I say to teachers is point this out to your students, but tell them there are 2 key things that they have complete control over. And one is the amount of effort they put in. And of course, teachers are always trying to get students to put in more effort. But the other is the way they apply that effort. In other words, the strategies they use. In other words, how they manage their time and tasks, how they motivate themselves, how they organize themselves, how they summarize information, how they remember information, how they develop understanding, all the ATL skills. And by improving the ATL skills, they will improve their subject outcomes. And so the sales job is showing students that the things they have control over are their ATL skills. And if they focus on improving their ATL skills, everything else will fall into place. And so this, I think, has got to be got across to students because, as Chiara said, I mean, Chiara is a wonderful student. You know, she did brilliantly at school. So she obviously took on board all these skills, but maybe she took them on board naturally, progressively, just by being educated. I guess the ATL skills program as an explicit or implicit program is more for the students who, if they learnt those skills really well, would be able to perform at the level that Chiara performed at. And if they don't learn those skills well, then they'll perform at a much lower level. And the skills application can make that difference. And I think that has to be deliberately pointed out to students. And I do it through teachers and through parents. I point that out to parents as well, that their best options for helping their children to improve their academic results is to make sure they improve their ATL skills.
Let's move on to the school's challenges, because I think we're moving in that direction already. So if we kind of skip ahead to this portion. Before we get into these questions here, I think it's a very difficult time to be a school leader, because in a post-COVID environment for the DP in particular, there were elements that were stripped out during the COVID years that are now being reintroduced. So from a teacher's perspective, they're thinking, well, I now need to teach more than I've taught over the past few years to a cohort of students who are already struggling with things like anxiety and mental health and time management and self-management and all these things. So it's challenging for the teacher and it's challenging for the student. So of course, there's this optic internally, which is, well, should the curriculum always trump skills? Because I need to get through the curriculum. I don't have a choice on that. So is it always that the curriculum will come at the sacrifice of skills? So maybe Javeria, coming to you on this one, how do you approach that as a school leader? It's a very difficult problem to solve.
So one of the basic concern and a big question mark in teachers' mind is whether these skills are to be taught explicitly or implicitly. And one thing that there's a mindset that anything that is assessed is more important than anything that is not going to be assessed. So when the skills are not assessed, at least not summatively, the mindset is to work towards getting 6s and 7s in the subjects. So when we are working to in that direction, we are missing out on an important toolkit, so to say, which can facilitate that 6 or 7. So first of all, we need to work on that mindset that ATLs are not an add-on. They are the base of it. They are, the impact of strengthening the core would go towards the outer side. So that needs to be strengthened. But then the question in their mind is that how to take out time for it. And by the way, time management is something which is a huge issue with teachers also, not just students. So they are also pressured with, doing justice to the curriculum and then somehow trying to teach the skill through while, they are struggling to, implement their lesson plans. So when I go towards the PYP side, that's when I tell them that, today you're not teaching about solar system or factors or, but in fact, you are teaching time management through a task sheet on solar system, or you're teaching them filtering out the right information through how sets and subsets are made in maths or whatever skill they are working or academic skill they are working on. So if we bring these skills into the center and plan our lessons accordingly and treat the curriculum as, as a sidekick, so to say, and the skill as the main focus, starting right from PYP, they will be better equipped. But to see the result magically being created when they are in their DP years, that is too much to ask for, because this is a long-term, it's a development of habits. It's not something that can be done overnight or within few months or with one summer course of ATL skills. This needs to be a lifestyle. And when I talk to parents, when I'm telling them, there's in my part of the world, there are multiple streams of education. So we have to talk parents, we have to give them this orientation that why the child should not do A levels and appear in 3 to 4 subjects and do DP where he has to study 6 subjects and the 3 core things. And then, so we have to convince them into this kind of education. And my selling point, if I may use this word, probably not the right way of saying it, but my selling point is that, it's not just the degree that they are going to earn or a good university placement, but it is a lifestyle. It is a way of thinking. It is a way of living that they will acquire through these skills. And myself being the parent of 2 DP students, 2 DP kids, I could see the kind of changes this program brought into their personality. So one of them was not a continuum child. One of them did his O levels and then moved towards DP. And for him to acquire these skills, although it was very difficult, the switch, but I can see the positive impact in his personality as a parent also. So his social skills, his way of dealing with stress, his way of dealing with his problem solving skills, I could see the impact as a parent. And now my second son, who's doing his DP right now, is a continuum student, and I see that he is way more wise and composed than even the adults around, because the focus has been on the skills. So I believe that as parents, also as adults, all of us would agree that getting 6s or 7s or a high score is not the ultimate goal eventually. So, and with the job market changing so unpredictably.
Let's hold off on that because we're going to come to that later. I don't want to spoiler alert on the later themes. But thank you, Javeria, for that answer. What I've tried to do on the right-hand side is split the ATLs into essentially the three streams. Lance and I have spoken about this a bit over the past few weeks. And one thing that we've discussed is the fact that, and Chiara, I'd love to hear your views on this, but the fact that cognitive skills clearly are something that we're hearing all the time, time management, self-management, organizational skills. But Lance, if I could come to you first, we've spoken about the fact that how do you teach those skills? How do you develop those skills if you're constantly dealing with anxiety or you don't have a sense of purpose? So you think that we should be really hammering home affective skills first. So would you mind maybe defining affective skills and then explaining why, if that is your philosophy, why you look at it that way?
Well, the affective skills are the more emotionally based skills, like self-motivation and resilience and perseverance and those kinds of, on that list there, yes, the self-motivation and resilience were the two top ones in there. Now, the problem, of course, with affective skills, or the comparison with cognitive skills, as I describe it, as cognitive skills, what we're doing is we're feeding them in. We're showing students, this is one really good way to manage your time. This is the way to organize your time. This is the way to take goals and break them down into sub-goals and break them down into objectives and timeline them and date them and prioritize them and make to-do lists and all the rest of the stuff. And that's feeding in. But affective skills, we can't feed them in. And in fact, I don't think we need to feed them in. What we need to do is we need to show students that they already have all the affective skills, but they may not be aware of them and they may not be using them in an academic context. It's like, for example, I'd say to students, think of a time when you were demonstrating resilience and they don't know what you mean because they don't really understand what the word means. So then you show them a few clips of people falling down and getting back up again and people recovering and overcoming adversity. And they go, oh, yes, sure, no problem. When I play football, I fall down all the time. And I say to them, well, how do you get yourself back up again? They go, I just get up, but hang on, what happens? Do you say something to yourself or do you imagine? Is there something that you use to kind of get yourself back up and back in the game? And they say, well, yeah, sure. And then what they've done is they've described a resilience strategy. So then I say to them, have you ever thought of using that same strategy when you're facing a maths problem or when you got something wrong in a science test? And they look a little confused. So this is the point, is that what we need to do with all the affective skills is show children how to draw them out and then get them to get explicit about that, actually write down what their strategy is, and then get them to try and deliberately apply that strategy in a different context. And suddenly they discover that being resilient in maths is very, very similar to being resilient in football. And they suddenly, everything becomes so much easier for them. And you cannot get to the cognitive skills, Tim, as you said, unless you've got a reasonably good affective base set up first. There was a wonderful man named John Heron who said all learning has an affective base. And I totally agree with that. If a child is anxious and nervous and worried and concerned, and they're just not going to participate well in learning. So these things have to be addressed first, but like I said, I think by drawing out rather than by feeding in.
Okay, and then Chiara, coming to you as the kind of in-house cognitive expert around time management and all these things, to put you on the spot, which I think is justified, assuming that we can give students and teachers this purpose and this courage. How do we separate? How do we establish which students have good self-management? Is it something that they always have, or can you develop it during the DP years?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question because, again, going back to something that has already been mentioned, is that sometimes the students, as well as the teachers, focus too much on the output, on getting that 7 or on getting 20 on their IAs, on sort of like getting that. And the process is not very examined. So if they pull 2 all-nighters and they sent in their work, that is okay because at least they sent it in. And I remember when I was at university, it was very interesting because I needed an extension. I'm just going to tell a tiny anecdote. I needed an extension for an essay. I wasn't getting in. It was the end of term. I was burnt out. And I emailed my supervisor and said, listen, could I please get an extension for tomorrow? Like, I'll do it. And I think I sent this in probably at like 12 a.m. at night. he replied instantly saying, you know what, take a full week. You need to rest. You cannot send this in to me because you're going to stay up until 5 a.m. working on it. So please take a break because you're burnt out. And it occurred to me that is super important as students to hear that, you know, that the process matters. And when I speak to students at school and I ask about time management, and the older they are, the more aware they are of importance of it. But I think what's also important is this idea of like students are almost bombarded with the idea of being productive, of putting in so much work, of studying all the time. So many students ask me, how many hours should I be studying per day? Or how many hours should I be revising every weekend? Or how does the the workload change over the years? And to me, I think it's mostly for them to find the time management that works for them. I don't think there's like an effective one. Of course, there are healthier ones than others. And of course, I always encourage students to take breaks, to sleep 8 hours, to do something fun with your friends, to think of all the fun things they can do over the summer, over the breaks, to sort of keep them motivated. And at the same time, try different methods. So I always tell them, you know, try writing things on a to-do list, or try planning on a calendar, or try getting a planner out and writing your deadlines in, or try these different apps to beat procrastination, you know. So I try to encourage them to see it as a process that is trial and error more than something that is imposed on them, or that they must use. So yeah, I think it's very interesting to talk to students and see that, because a lot of the DP coordinators I've spoken to are concerned about these skills and are concerned that they are not very good at time management. So yeah, I think that was a long answer, but I think it's stressing how health and free time is also very important in the IB is crucial for students.
I wonder if the professor you're referring to was also a parent and
probably
students are going through. And then I guess we come finally to metacognitive. So here we're talking about, you know, thinking about thinking and kind of knowing about knowing. I guess, although it's maybe not definitively a metacognitive skill, Javeria, finally coming to you on a kind of communication, collaboration perspective, which we talked about a little bit earlier on. Do you see that this is improving as students have come back to school? And are there any explicit methods you're using in school to drive that kind of collaboration and communication? Or is it something that you're hoping will just improve over time?
Going back to that very day when they came back to the school, I was talking to my staff and I said that finally there will be some sound, some noise in the school, something happening in the corridors, and school will come back to life. However, ironically, by 11 o'clock, I took a round. I went out of my office and visited some classes, and I could feel silence that is not realistic in terms of 500 students being in the school. But there was silence and there was very less activity. And when I went into the classes and I saw students literally sitting like, um, mute and not moving much. And I asked them, what's up? And do you guys have a test, or is there something coming up your way? What's wrong? And they said, we are tired. We are just tired. We want to go back home. Because, they were used to of taking classes from their study table, or most of the times from their bed. So the very activity, the very physical activity was draining for them. And then they were quiet with each other. They were not talking. And it was really a strange feeling that students were not talking to each other. There was no noise coming from the classrooms. So comparing that to today, yes, they have recovered. The recovery rate is extremely good. However, they do not collaborate in terms of reaching out when they are in a fix, when they are in a problem. Because when they were confined in the four walls, within the four walls of their room and interacting with people online, a very limited number of problem solving was happening because problems were not shared on screen. So even when they came back and they started becoming normal and some sense of normalcy came back to school life, they are not still there to collaborate or work in groups and teams the way they used to, or the way they could have done after 2 years of proper social life at school. So it is still a challenge. So even with communicating there are problems with the teachers. Now, one of the dreadful words that all DP students can relate to is deadlines, submission dates. And I'm so glad that, Chiara, you asked for the extension and at least you reached out to your professor. Students are still reluctant to reach out. They, they feel that, I am not good enough anymore. I'm not able to meet the deadline. There's something wrong. There's a lot of panic, internalization of this whole situation. And instead of reaching out to the teachers, they, let the assignments pile up on them. So I would go back to the point that Lance has said about a sales job. A lot of positive reinforcement is needed, a lot of repeating of the same lines. They need to hear it again and again from us, that it's all right to ask for help. It's all right to ask for, to reach out to us. So their social skills and communication skills are, on the right track, but not really there where they could have been.
Okay, well, we're kind of moving into solutions mode. So I know a lot of people who have joined us today want to hear what solutions we are putting in place in schools. So let's move on then to the pillars of a great framework. And there is, as Chiara correctly said, when it comes to time management, of course, there's no one-stop shop for all schools. It will vary massively based on if it's a continuum school, if there are thought leaders in the school who have explicit experience within ATL or 21st century skills, how involved students already are in this area. But there are some solutions. So Lance, maybe if we could start with you here. We spoke a little bit about a few of the kind of golden nuggets you would offer to schools to say, well, there's no guidebook to delivering a perfect ATL, but these are the things you'd start with. So do you want to pick any of those themes on the right-hand side there that you'd like to delve into? You spoke about showcasing strong ATL students. Maybe we could start with that one.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I can't quite see that. Oh, I've got it now.
Can't, then,
okay,
I mean,
no. Sorry,
oh,
I've got it. So yes, showcasing strong students. Yes, that's. You see, the approach. Let's just say we're taking an IB World school and that are starting to put in place an ATL program. I guess you've got to start with the essentials. So I would go to the best. I would go to Chiara. I would go to the best student in grade 12 and do an analysis of that student and find out exactly what the skills are that that student had in abundance that enabled that student to be the top student. And then I would make sure that those skills were put in, were available for other students to learn, working backwards from that point. You know, it's like, I mean, how are schools judged? Well, the schools are judged on their IBDP pass rate, and if they're doing an IGCSE, the pass rate. You know, they're judged on the performance in examinations. And although examinations, I think, are a crazy thing and not a good judge of anything at all, there's still ways schools are judged. So you've got to work back from the exam. So what does a child need in order to pass their DP exam well? Well, as we've mentioned, they need to be a good time manager, but they also need to be able to self-motivate. They need to be able to deal with pressure and stress. They need to be able to organize resources. They need to be able to process information rapidly. In other words, they need to learn how to skim read, how to summarize, how to make key point notes, how to review that information regularly, how to develop understanding. It just goes on and on and on. But those are the key things that you need for the DP exam. So the question then becomes, when are you going to get those skills taught or practiced in class? And so each skill needs to be introduced at a certain point. It needs to be practiced over a certain number of years. And you need to be thinking about, well, do we want students to get to mastery of that skill? And if so, by when? So we've got to build frameworks that show when these skills need to be introduced, when they need to be practiced, and if and when they need to be mastered in order to produce a student like Chiara at the end of grade 12. You know, that's the aim, that's the goal. And so showcasing strong students, I think, is a good way to start. But, you know, you've got to work this all the way back to grade 1. There's no reason why children can't, I mean, I promote a kind of a core ATL skill program, which has got about 19 different strands in it that I think should be in place from grade 1 to grade 12. And those are the core skills. And so we're going to start by making sure those are in place, and we've got to think about how we're going to develop those skills right the way through all the grades. And then once that's in place, then you can start building the more subject-specific skills, the skills that it takes to be a good chemist, the skills that it takes to be a good musician, to be a good artist, to be a good geographer, to be a good whatever. And you start building the subject-specific skills on top of the basic core skills. But it's a big process. But if it started early enough, then it doesn't have to take time out of what teachers, precious teaching time. And the last point I'd make is that teachers need to realize, of course, that even though ATL skills take time to get across to students and get practiced with students, the more students practice those skills, the more efficient and effective they will be in learning. And so the more effective their learning will be. And so the time spent engaged with subject matter will be reduced. So the overall effect of a good ATL skills program is actually a reduction in teaching time. But that's the end goal. That takes time to get to that point. That's probably enough from me.
No, well, I could have to listen for another half an hour, to be honest. But let's move to Javeria first, and then I'll come back to you, Chiara. And we are we're okay for time, but we haven't got a huge amount. Within a school, the other challenge, I guess, Javeria, is having leaders in a continuum school working together. Do you think that there should be one ATL lead at the top of the food chain, or should it be an ATL lead per DP, MYP, and PYP collaborating, learning from each other, working together? Which system, and perhaps you don't have exposure to other schools and how they're doing it, but from your perspective, how do you think this is dealt with best?
Now, I'm one of the lucky ones, because I often say that the situation I'm in is so perfect that being the extended essay coordinator, the theory of knowledge teacher, and the ATL lead, I always say that these three are like siblings for me. They all share the same gene and the same philosophy behind them. So if we talk about cognitive skills or thinking skills or research skills, EE coordinators are all about it. They are all the time training their supervisors, their teachers, their students about these skills. When it comes to theory of knowledge, it involves a lot of communication skill. Like, for example, you're negotiating your perspective with others, you're sharing it with others, and you're extended a lot of respect and empathy and compassion towards other people sharing a different perspective than you. And a lot more is involved in theory of knowledge when you're reflecting that, how do I know what I know? And how do I apply it? And where was this knowledge produced? So a lot of reflection skills are going on with the TOK teachers. And when they are trying to integrate TOK throughout the continuum. And then comes the ATL lead, who is all about these skills. If these three people work together, if I am the lucky one who's wearing all three hats together, but I see the learning graph for my own self. When I assumed all three roles together, my learning improved immensely. I feel that if these three people work together, and then they can have a program ATL leads if they want to, if that's a doable thing in a school context, why not? But if these three people come together, they are all working on the same skills. And one thing common in these three things is also that ATLs are not at all assessed, but there is a different way of assessing TOK and extended essay also. It's not that rigorous everyday lessons to gain a 6 or a 7 in your subject. These two are very, very skill-based subjects. So a lot of critical thinking, a lot of processing the information that is coming your way and expressing your views and perspectives with connecting it to the world around you is needed over there. So they are assessed in a different way, mostly formatively, and later on, the core components are assessed summatively. But because that fear of assessment is always not there in all these three things, as it is there in other subjects, these three people can actually work together to, build a culture of, a school culture where ATLs are at the center of this whole situation.
Wonderful. And then finally, Chiara, coming to you, you spend, this is wonderful, Chiara, just a big ego boost for her these past 40 minutes, but you spend most of your year traveling around the world, going into schools, giving sessions to motivate students. And I think you have a very lucky perspective because you get to see different schools and the things that they're struggling with, but also you can be the voice that the teacher can't be, that you can be the student, the aspirational kind of student, what the student wants to become, which a teacher can be on day one. But of course, as time progresses, it's hard to keep that kind of mentor and lecturer role at the same time. So are you seeing the same things in schools? And what would you say to schools about using outside resource to motivate students, bringing in alumni, bringing in people like yourself, bringing in guest speakers to build courage, to build purpose, to build motivation? Does it work everywhere, or do you see different results in different schools?
Well, yeah, I think it's a really great opportunity to talk to students, and students really appreciate that. Before going into that, I want to say that I've been to 50 different IB schools, or schools that have the IB. And with this question of sort of the ATL framework, I think it's very tricky because a lot of the schools I went to offer the IB only in the last final 2 years. And maybe they have one IB year that is the pre-DP, where students sort of transition from the national curricula they had been doing until then, and then they go into DP. And those are the students that I think struggle the most, because it's a big jump in terms of the content they're covering, but also the skills that are required. And in a lot of the schools, students are scared of choosing the IB actually, because they see it as a big sort of effort and stress. And it's usually maybe like a third of the students who choose to do the IB, and then 2/3 choose to do the other programs. And they see it as a way of like studying in English and taking on a challenge. But I think what Javeria said about sort of bringing in the importance of the skills and how amazing it is in that sense is great. Now, going back to the question of sort of going back and talking to the students, I think they really appreciate it. And a lot of the DP coordinators tell me, I've said exactly what you said to them 10 times in the past 3 years. They haven't listened to me. They only need one person who has gone through what they're going through and who understands the struggles that the IB throws at you and the challenges that they go through to sort of understand that. And personally, as a student, when I was doing the DP, I remember we had a session in my school with 5 graduates who came to talk to us about the IB and about university choices, because we were all stressed about university choices back then. And I remember it so vividly, even now. It's been over 5 years. And that was one of the most useful sessions I had, because having it sort of built a empathy, and I could relate to them. And I think that is super important for students to see that, and especially DP2 students to know that there's life after the IB and that you can do many different wonderful stuff with the IB. So yeah, I think it is really, really useful. And I would encourage, all schools to have or to bring their own graduates or people who have gone through the IB to talk to students. I think it's great.
I'll just say quickly, you said 5 years. I'm about 100 now, but when I did the IB, we also had some alumni come back, and I can remember it vividly as well. I think it does offer a huge amount of aspirational leadership, I suppose. Lance, were you about to add something there?
Yes, if I can make a comment. I think one of the best things that all schools can do is get their grade 12 students to talk to their grade 11 students. And it doesn't happen very often. And get their grade 11 students to talk to their grade 10 students, and get their grade 10 students to talk to their just to tell them, if I had my time over again, the things that I would do slightly differently would be, the things I actually should have learned before I started this year were, the things that I found difficult this year that I could have learned previously, and it will all, of course, be ATL skills. And this is the most useful information that kids can get, is that the experience of the next year fed back to them in time for them to prepare for that same experience. And the only other comment I make is that I've been going into schools teaching programs of essentially ATL skills for 27 years. And I'm often called a motivational speaker. And I always say that, no, that's not true at all. I said, I don't ever motivate students. My aim is to teach students how to motivate themselves. And I think that's a significantly different thing. And you know, we can all be motivated by a wonderful speaker, and that's a great thing. But if that speaker doesn't teach us how to do it for ourselves, then the next day we're back to being flat again. And so a program of affective skills combined with a program of cognitive skills is just exactly the right mix to pass over to students so they learn how to motivate themselves. And then once they've generated that motivation, what to do with that, how to get organized, how to work really well, and how to be effective and efficient learners. I think that's the secret sauce.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I realize in these different nuggets, we may have had some more themes to dive into. Well, actually, we want to allow a bit of time to look at the future, but maybe let's just talk briefly about the exam side of things. You know, we've spoken a little bit about the fact that ATLs are not examined per se, but of course, anybody listening in who's a DP coordinator is thinking, this is all well and good, but I have exams, my students have exams in a few months' time. Where's the ATL that fits best in there? So when it comes to giving students a sense of purpose, which areas of the ATLs can we give to students now? Which areas can we enhance now for DP2 students going into their exam session now? And open floor here really to anybody who'd like to contribute.
I'm happy to just to put a little piece in here, because I did this just 2 weeks ago. I did this in Frankfurt at the Metropolitan School of Frankfurt. I worked with their grade 12 students who were just about to go into their DP, and I had 90 minutes with them. That's all. And so I'll tell you the things that, and they seem to really get a lot out of what I did. So the things I did was I started off with a little story trying to show them the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I mean, one really good example is Olympic sports. You know, what does every single Olympic athlete have in common as a goal? And of course, they all said, well, gold medal. And I said, no, they don't. The single common thing that every single Olympic athlete has in mind as a goal is to do a PB, is to do a personal best. And that's what you use competition for, to do a personal best. But a personal best is an intrinsic motivational factor. It's not an extrinsic motivational factor, you know, and that's what makes the difference. And so teaching children the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, so make sure they're generating intrinsic motivators, which are so much stronger. And then teaching them the whole failing well stuff, how to use mistakes as a positive mechanism to learn more. And then teaching them how to get organized, obviously, time management strategies, teaching them how to organize information, how to shrink information, how to summarize information, how to build understanding, how to recall information well, and then finishing off with that exam techniques and reducing exam nerves. That was the 90 minutes that I did with them, and it seemed to be really well received. So that would be my little package thing.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
So yeah, I always ask students that there is a lot of a lot of suggestions are given to you, a lot of advices are given to you from all the adults around you, from all the stakeholders in this situation. But then there is this inner voice also. And there are two kinds of inner voice. One is something that is, pulling you down, something that leads to a lot of procrastination, a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of self-doubt creating voice. How to mute that voice and how to raise the volume of the positive inner voice, which is telling you that, yes, you've got it, you can do it, and your only competition is your own last performance and not the people around you. And, the only thing is that I feel that cognitive skills or metacognitive skills affective skills are sandwiched between this, which is very emotive, which is all coming from inside. It is inside out kind of a thing. So if that emotive balance is achieved by playing alpha with your mind and not letting your mind play games with you that I can't do it, or there are too many tasks to be done and I don't know what to do, and all that thought traffic that students have, a lot of entanglement of thoughts in their mind, that is the time when they need to learn how to mute that negative voice and tell themselves that this is a situation that can be brought under control. This is a situation where I can rise above it. and they need to play alpha with their mind. How can you achieve mastery at metacognitive skills is simply to tell your mind, talk to it as if it's another individual, and give it some audience that, listen, I'm going to do it. I know what I'm doing, and you need to be a little quiet for a while now. So let me take control of the situation. You need to tell your mind what to think. If you start thinking on these lines that I need to tell my mind what it's going to think, then your mind will start listening to you. Otherwise, if you let it loose, it's going to make you go crazy. So what I tell students is that learn to hear those two inner voices, identify which is the positive one, identify which is, pulling your self-esteem down, and then put it on mute. Learn to put it on mute. And this needs a lot of positive reinforcement again and again, because every second day they are again flat, and they again need to be brought back up. So yeah.
It sounds like you both read that book, The Chimp Paradox, because I know a bunch of Olympians have referred to it as their secret sauce, and it's all about the monkey brain and the kind of left and right side brain. So if anyone listening is interested, I would recommend it. Chiara, finally to you, and then let's look to the future. You've got 20 seconds to speak to your 18-year-old self to say, you've got this come IB exam time. What are you saying?
Yeah, no, I think it's like what I usually tell students to do. A lot of them ask me, what should I do the night before? What do I do on the exam day? And I tell them, think that, you're your biggest sort of fan. You have to say, I'm going to go in and show them all I know. They're going to be impressed by how amazing I am, and like having this sort of very motivating self-talk before the exam is the best thing to do, because then it stops them worrying about what they don't know and gets them thinking about all the amazing things that they know and how to put that knowledge forward. So I always tell them to go like that, because that's what helped me do well in the exams. So yes.
Well, it sounds like you didn't need the help from your future self anyway, but still,
yeah,
the option. Okay, so let's jump ahead then and look briefly at the future. Some interesting challenges on the horizon for all teachers, all educators, the IB, different examining bodies. And I've tried to distill these down into three key themes. One is how AI will play a part in our education coming up, whether as a consequence of that and ATLs more broadly, we should be considering open book exams. And of course, the IBO are already considering IBO exams. And finally, and off to the right there, how can we future-proof students for careers that we don't know a huge amount about? Now, there's different data around what percentage of jobs exist or don't, so we don't need to go into the logistics there, but we do want to equip students for the future. So maybe let's jump into the middle one. Let's have a little quick discussion about open book exams. ATLs aren't examined at the moment, but they could be if we changed exams to be open book. So Lance, let's go to you first. What's your view on, should the IBDP change to more of an open book philosophy? We're seeing a version of that with MYP e-assessments already. And please come off mute if you're ready to jump in on that
one. I'm a big fan of open book exams. I've been promoting the idea of open book exams for 37 years. When I finished university, I did a food technology degree, was my first degree. And one of the exams I sat was a 9-hour exam. And it was an open book exam. And this would have been in 1976. And so some students arrived with a wheelbarrow full of books and stacked them up on the desk like a fortress. And they performed terribly because they had too much information. Whereas other students had done synthesis and done analysis and done summaries and done it really well and had just key pieces of paper around them and performed much better. And there's whole strategies on open book exam. But that exam was the best exam I've ever sat, and I've sat lots. And it was absolutely fabulous because it actually tested exactly what we were going to need when we went into industry and work. It was kind of like an industrial chemist's job. And so we had to we had to design a whole product, like from ground up, right to the market, right through the factory, everything. And it was an absolutely brilliant exam, and it tested what we actually needed. Now, when you think about the future, the things that students actually need for the future, they are going to be immersed in information. They're going to be swamped with information. in any job. And so what they're going to need are obviously the ATL skills. So the only way we can actually create an examination that actually tests what they're going to need is to make sure all the questions are written around ATL skills. Given this information, I want you to do this with it and see if you can produce this product. That's the skill for that's the sum of the whole skill. You know, you've got to research it, you've got to find the stuff, you've got to determine what is true, you've got to analyze it, you've got to synthesize it, you've got to be creative, you've got to come up with new ideas. And that type of scenario also defeats the Chat GPT point you've got on the screen there, because the Chat GPT can't do that. Chat GPT can write you a great essay about anything that it is available online, but given this information, I want you to apply this skill to produce this product. It can't do that. But my concern would be if the exam was open book and it was written around ATL skills, that then the ATL skills themselves will be graded. Now, I find that to be that's the actual challenging part, because I don't think that can be effectively graded. I really don't. I think that's the challenge. The challenge is not so much how to create open book exams, it's how to actually still produce some valid grade. But then they did it for my 9-hour exam, so I guess it's all possible.
I don't envy you. 9 hours sounds horrendous. I think my longest was, well, actually in the IB, I had all my physics papers back to back, so that was, I think, 7 hours in one day. With writing an open book exam is hard, isn't it? Because if you think about, I mean, Javeria or Chiara coming to you, it makes the examiner's job much more difficult to ask a question. Any views on that?
Well, yes. So actually, I had to do open book exams all throughout uni, but that wasn't actually initially the plan. It was just because of COVID, they transformed the exams. So in the original exam was going to be 3 hours in an exam hall, write 3 essays about politics or about sociology, and they gave you a list of essays. That exam in my final year changed completely, and it was 3 hours, but open book, and you do it on your laptop online. And it was great because, again, it wasn't assessing what you knew, but how you could put the arguments together to have an original argument. And actually, what was interesting about the way that they were marking the essays is that they were looking for creative and critical originality, which was very hard to get. Every single year, the students asked, how do you grade what's original, what's not original? But it was the idea of sort of applying the knowledge that you had to a new example, or putting arguments together in conversation to create something new. And that was very interesting and very tricky to do, even open book. So I think, of course, it's a different skill that you're being assessed in, but I think a skill that is much more useful and creative in a way than just writing what you know.
Javeria, did you have something you'd like to add there?
Yeah, because I'm teaching a subject that is almost an open book thing, TOK. Like when you're working on your essay, you have all the resources at your hand, and you are basically applying knowledge to a scenario, and you are creating a coherent response, right? So the assessment rubric of TOK essay has certain words against which it is assessed, that if the essay is coherent, if it is lucid, if it is, if it is showing critical thinking, if the knowledge application is there. So that is very much a doable framework. Yes, it is turned into a score later on, but the actual assessment rubric is not a numerical rubric. So it is possible. I agree with Lance that you cannot really assess skills. You cannot assess how motivated someone is. You cannot assess how well someone is communicating, or what kind of focus someone has developed over the year. These are abstract, intangible ideas which cannot be put to this test of, it would kill the purpose of ATLs. It would kill the entire, philosophy of it. But I do think that open book would be possible if done on the structure of TOK, for example, where it is actually happening already. And can I add a bit about the Chat GPT thing also?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's a huge challenge. It's a huge worry. I was, in fact, saying that my job would be the first casualty of it, because who would need research papers when some software can write it for you? So what will I do? But then again, when we look at the academic integrity point of view, when we look at from that lens, I mean, it is again like giving students a skill that they have to make the right choice and they have to make the right decision and practice academic integrity and develop their own skill of research instead of using a software. And the software can also be conducively used, you know, because they are having other softwares also which they use, for example, their language check softwares, for example, like Grammarly and whatnot. They are using a lot of such softwares already. So this should not be a worry for us because we are already talking about academic integrity all the time. And it's a pledge, it's a decision that they have to live with. So I think that's the narrative we should build, that make right choices. And that's again a life skill.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, but I think it's also very important to stress that the IB's already come out and said that they're accepting ChatGPT essentially as a reference. You can reference ChatGPT as one of your sources. And I think that's really progressive, as the IB always is in these conversations. I think to some extent, one of the IB's challenges is that they're so progressive. You look at the e-assessments, it was almost ahead of their time in terms of adoption in schools, because many parents just didn't really understand it. Many universities didn't really understand it. So I don't think there's any risk that the IB is going to be left behind in this discussion around progressive technology. We will have to jump ahead now just quickly to, well, actually, we should have jumped into these again. I get so excited about each slide that we don't go into the kind of sub slides, but I think we've covered all of these key points. So let's wrap up quickly, and I see in the Q&A we've got 48 questions, so we're not going to get through all of those, but if people have time to stick around for another 15 minutes or so, we can address those. Let's just quickly look at let's see what we have here in the Q&A section. A couple of solutions we have for schools. So for any schools listening, just a couple of quick things to offer you, and then we'll jump into Q&A. Chiara was right here where I was a few weeks ago filming a wonderful asynchronous course. So that QR link there can take any school leader who's present today to 2 free courses we have on ATL skills. One is time management skills. One is an extended essay writing course. They're both fantastic. They're both done properly for asynchronous learning, where it's a short video, a prompt, a question, and it takes you through and through and through. And they're really, really good. Likewise for the extended essay course. So please, for any school leaders, take a look at those if you like. Alongside that, Lance and I have been working very closely over the last few weeks to design this, an in-school 3-day ATL course. Now, it's very hard to come up with a solution that works for everybody. I had a lot of conversations with school leaders. Every school needs something a little bit different. There is no one-stop shop. However, this is the best thing that we could come up with in the present day, which is to have a 3-day skills-focused course to empower your students, to give them agency going into their DP studies. So we have limited people like Chiara available to facilitate these. So if you're interested, please reach out to us and we can help hopefully run a session in your school if you're interested. We'd love to work with you. With that, let's open up to any questions we have. Anna, I wonder if you have been manning the Q&A session, if there are any questions that have been upvoted or any key questions that you think we should be putting to the panel this afternoon. Don't know if I can hear.
While you're waiting for that, I just apologize for the background noise. You'll notice my face is really red. It's because it's 37 degrees in Bangkok, and I turned the air conditioning down because it's a bit noisy, and I've just noticed that my temperature's gone through the roof, so I've just turned it back up again.
Get it on. We can't hear it. It's fine.
Oh, okay. That's
always
good.
A pleasure to have you in these sessions. I'm not hearing Anna. I don't know if anybody else is. I can see these questions here. So I'm just trying to think if there are any here that we should be addressing. Okay, here's quite a good one. For learners who demonstrate excellent ATL skills since DP1, how do you keep them motivated and continue without getting bored or disengaged post-COVID? Anybody want to pick that one up? I can repeat it because it's quite a detailed question.
Yes, can you repeat it?
Sure. For learners who demonstrate excellent ATL skills since DP1, how do you keep them motivated and continue without getting bored or disengaged? I think we're talking about students who start well in the ATLs, but maybe lose focus or lose motivation going into their second year? How do you keep that motivation level up the whole way through the DP?
I think Chiara is probably the only one who can really answer that.
No, this is interesting because I'm actually tutoring quite a few students in DP2 who right now say, I just want to be done. Like, I don't have the motivation to keep going for another 2 months until exams is over. Like, I'm done now. Because again, they've had so much, and those students who have already developed the skills in DP1, of course, motivation is one of those skills. So I guess they could keep that up as well. But I think as well, what Lance mentioned about the sort of intrinsic and extrinsic goals and how to set that motivation going, I think that is super important. And that's one of the things I tell my students to do, saying, you know, let's set some goals at the beginning of the class of what you want to achieve by the end of it, but what the things that you want to have learned and the skills that you want to have developed after the sessions. And that actually helps students focus on the there and now, and of like just completing tiny tasks in that week, instead of just focusing on like, oh gosh, I have 2 full months of work before I sit the exams. So I think as well as just to sort of try to help them change their perspective and focus on their main goals and motivations. That can usually help.
And I'd add to that exactly what you're saying, exactly true. And teaching children or students how to move from short-term to long-term goals. You've got to focus on your short-term goals because you've got stuff you've got to get done. But when you get overwhelmed in the short-term goals, lift your eyes up to the long-term goals. Now, the long-term goals are all about meaning and purpose. So what makes the meaning and purpose in your life? And what do you dream of? You know, what do you imagine could make the meaning and purpose in your life? You know, the thing that gets every person through difficult times is meaning and purpose. And so what is out there? What are you leading towards? What is the best thing you could possibly do in your life? You know, where is it going? What's it heading to? You've got to look at that, and you've got to see it, and you've got to visualize, you've got to imagine it, and that will give you the energy to get back into the short-term goals and get through the work Because, you know, how do you eat an elephant? You only eat it one bite at a time. And that's the only way you're going to get there. But you've got to, teaching them to pull their eyes up and then pull them down and pull them up and pull them down. Just what Chiara was saying.
Can I add something here, Tim?
Please, yeah.
So, you know, this phase is, I talked to certain DP2 students who were feeling this kind of demotivation, and I asked them the reasons. And I got some responses which I had not thought of, that probably this was going in their mind. And their response was that this is a big transition. We'll be leaving our school life after 12 years of schooling with our friends and, you know, this environment. And we'll probably be flying away from our homes also. So the mindset of the student at this time is overwhelmed because they are anticipating big changes in their life. And that change needs to be, talked about, either through alumni or through adults who have gone through and with whom they can have that relatability factor, that this is a positive transition. This is, you know, the time to enjoy the fruit of all your hard work and moving towards newer challenges. So that kind of talk did uplift their spirits a bit. But we do need to realize that it's a big transition for them. It's not just the fear of the exam or the demotivation after a rigorous DP program. It's just that they know that a huge change is coming in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just busy trying to read these. We've had some fantastic questions coming through. It's hard to kind of stay on top of them. I'll just, Anna, just one second, and then I'll go to you. A great point.
We can hear you, Anna. I just heard Anna's voice. I haven't seen her, but I just heard her voice.
Yeah, Anna, you go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just trying to fix my microphone and not really sure what happened there, but I've got another question. We have some excellent questions, but there's one in particular. Do students need to know the skill indicators, or do they need to just need to possess the skills?
Javeria, maybe that's one you could pick up on.
Can you please repeat the question, Tim? Can you rephrase it?
Yeah. Do students need to know the skill indicators, or do they just need to possess the skills?
So yeah, that's what I talked about, that the 5 umbrella terms are not enough for a student to know what they actually imply, because their challenges are the mini challenges that are addressed by the skill indicators. And then we've got a whole continuum to reinforce these skills if we start from PYP. So I personally believe, out of my experience, that yes, they must know the skill indicators. They should be introduced to the skill indicators in a structured way, not as the whole document thrown towards them. It should be done in a structured way. Baby steps should be taken. And why not introduce them what effective skills mean, or what transfer means actually, or what it implies? Because if we will not go into the depth of skill indicator, how would we align the right strategy with it? So yeah.
If I could add to that, within the MYP framework and within the DP framework and the PYP framework, there's many, many strands, hundreds of strands. And I think one of the things that teachers can do is to create a mastery statement for each strand and use a self-assessment system to turn the mastery statement into a question and ask students to self-assess against the mastery statement. Now, when Tim introduced me, he said my business was Lalatat. That's not exactly true. My business is actually called Tao Learn, The Art of Learning, TAO Learn.com. And if you go to TAOlearn.com and you go to the ATL resources page, you'll find the spreadsheets. I've already made all the spreadsheets, both MYP and DP, with all the mastery statements turned into questions. Now, if teachers did a cut and paste out of those documents, they could produce a self-assessment thing for students to look at and get a clear indicator of what every strand means. And, and within the MYP framework, it started off 134 strands. Well, I've reduced it down to 75, and that's all the strands I think we need, because I got rid of the duplication. And the DP is about the same. So you can make these individual strand mastery questions that students can reflect on and use actually as they progress through the self-assessment system from a novice to an expert. So it is available if anyone's interested.
Yeah, Lance, I apologize. At the beginning, you said you're good at failing well and you're a failed business. I can't help it if you've had 2 successful businesses subsequently. That's it's hard to the different different paths. We have had a bunch of good.
I would like to share another strategy here, Tim, if we are not short of time.
If you're very quick, I want to make sure we get onto other questions as well.
Yeah. So what I've done very quickly and in a very outline way, what I've done with all skill indicators is that I've aligned them with the learning objectives of each subject. So each skill indicator has been aligned with the learning objective, and then the relevant strategies has been, plotted over there. And the alignment goes on till the learner profile alignment also with these skill indicators. Now, when the teacher is teaching how to, talk to a number of audience and share a variety of text with a number of audience, then the skill indicator that aligns with that skill, with that objective has been, aligned. And hence the curriculum and the ATL skill indicators have been aligned. And that is really helping. Another very quick strategy is that I've created a quadrant where students can be given the skill indicators of one skill, one at a time, and they can choose whether they would want to learn this skill as an explicit practice, or they feel that they are already at the expert level, or they need this specific skill for their academic results, and they can move those skills around in those 4 quadrants. So while they are doing it, they are doing the self-analysis that Lance is talking about on their own. And that results into a lot of student agency also, that they are taking the onus of which skill they want to learn first and through which strategy. So that works also. Yeah, thank you.
No, wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Javeria. That's really helpful advice. There are lots of other questions, and I'll just throw one into the pile, and then we have time for one more after that. This is less a question, more kind of prompt. I've lost it in my thread here, but someone mentioned CAS. We haven't spoken about CAS. And Javeria, when you mentioned extended essay and TOK, I mean, CAS is the other very interesting strand here, where to implement, to test these skills being implemented in a non-examined, I mean, it's a binary examination, but non-examined way. That seems like rich soil in which to plant these seeds.
Yes, because a lot of collaboration, a lot of social skills go into it, a lot of planning go into any CAS project, and then towards the end, when they after each activity, when they're writing their reflections, a lot of thinking and, reflecting on their actions that go into the process. So definitely CAS is one thing where, and that's a very good question. That's rather a good point, that when I'm saying that the TOK and the extended essay and ATL people can work together, I think CAS coordinator can be brought into that spectrum, and these duties can be delegated, or this task of reinforcing the skills. So that's rather a good tip you have given to us, whoever has posted that question.
It's a very good point.
Yeah.
Anna, I'll come back to you. Any final key questions you've seen? There's so much good discussion going on that I've actually lost track a little bit of the other good questions.
So it's not a question, it's more of a statement, but I think we could probably expand on this slightly if time allows. So let me just jumped. So yeah, one of the points we repeatedly see from teachers is I'm teaching research skills by giving research tasks, or I'm developing self-management skills by setting deadlines, without any actual helping students to learn the how to do these things. This is proving very tricky to tackle, as when challenged, many staff push the responsibility onto students.
I think that's enough to go by. I saw Lance nodding along. So Lance, would you mind if we come to you? Because it sounds like that struck a nerve.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the common thing, isn't it? It's like teachers might, teachers put children into groups and do group work, and then they tick off collaboration skills. They get children talking to each other and they tick off communication skills. They set a research project and they tick off research skills. It's complete nonsense. It's not teaching ATL at all. In fact, that's abdicating the teaching of ATL, because in order for children to communicate, collaborate, and research well, they've got to know how to. They've got to be taught all the strands. Within collaboration, there are 20 different strands. Within research skills, there are at least 20 different strands. And those strands in research are about how to create good search terms, how to do good online searching, how to compare and contrast information, how to validate the truth, how to create a good argument. There's just so many good research skills that need to be taught to students, that putting it on students and saying, well, I gave them a research project, they did their research. That's nonsense. And this is actually the problem, is that skills are significantly important, and they can increase the quality of the research and the discussion and the communication. They can increase the quality of it enormously, but they have to be specifically taught. I mean, one thing I've been focusing on recently, what people seem to be doing is they take a unit, and within a unit, they end up identifying like 10 different ATL skills, and then they just tick them off. I say that's complete nonsense. What you need to do is think about what would be the one ATL skill that would most help students to gain the understanding that you want them to gain in that unit. One skill per unit. And I say one ATL skill per unit, well taught, well practiced, and well developed, one per unit is much, much better than 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 on a given lip service and ticked off. So I'm trying to zoom people in on just one ATL skill per unit. And it's actually getting some good traction, because then they spreadsheet it and they write in what ATL skill they're focused on what unit. And you can actually get a really good visual representation of what ATL skills are being addressed. But because it's only one per unit, it's done properly. Anything else, I think, is a waste of time, personally.
That's yeah, it sounds pretty good. I think it's we spoke about this before, isn't it? See one, do one, teach one philosophy in medicine, where, if you're actually applying it, you're learning it much more concretely. We are coming up to time. I'm going to summarize quickly, and then we'll come back to I just had a very good idea. Come back to all of our panelists. And at the beginning, we started with, if you were an ATL skill, which would it be? We're all lifelong learners here. So I'm going to put this to you when I wrap up, which is, which ATL skill would you most like to develop? Where's the chink in your armor, and where would you like to focus in your own learning? So this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much to everybody for taking part. We had almost 100 people joining us today. So great to get from all over the world, seemingly all the way from the States to Asia and everywhere in between. This has been recorded, so we'll send it out to everybody who joined and all the DP coordinators around the world so they can hopefully share it with their IB communities. We're also releasing a white paper about, I think, hopefully this week, actually, which summarizes the findings from the survey. So look out for that. And please do let us know if you're interested in one of our summer skills courses, because our facilitators will be in very high demand and low supply. So please reach out soon if you're interested in one of those. So yeah, thank you everybody so much. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I'm not going to expose myself by saying which ATL skill I'd like to develop, but to our panelists, as a closing offering, if you were to improve one of your own ATL skills, which one would that be? Chiara, I'm going to put you on the spot first. You've not spoken in a
Okay, gosh, I was hoping to go last so I could gauge what other people were saying. But I think this is quite a key one, is sort of the metacognitive skills, the thinking about thinking and the reflection about reflection, and being open always to develop new strategies and being able to identify when things are not working and trying new things. I think that's a skill that I think I have it, but I think I want to develop more and be ready to acknowledge when something is not working and trying to find different ways to go about it.
Wonderful. I appreciate your authenticity. Javeria, you look ready to reveal your soul to us as well.
Yeah, so I feel technologically challenged most of the time. Half my life, I've felt that when I'm done learning one thing, something new comes up. So I would like to work on my transfer skills and, apply my current knowledge in learning the new technologies and thinking skills, because there is an overwhelming onslaught of new technology. And we have to keep up because our students are way ahead in terms of different softwares and different learning techniques. So we have to keep up. We are old dinosaurs, at least I am. So I really need to, catch up. And that's overwhelming at times. Yeah.
Self-awareness is half the battle. I think that's a very, very candid. And finally, Lance, coming to you.
Well, for mine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a new category of skills, and it's called retirement. And we're going to drill down on that category till we get down to the fishing skills. And those are the skills that I'm looking forward to developing more and more. But every time I think about retirement or semi-retirement, I seem to get a new project on. So it hasn't quite happened yet, but yes. And I guess the thing that intrigues me most is creativity, is generating ideas for new platforms, ideas for new resources, ideas for new teaching technologies. And so I think I'll always end up being hooked back by creativity and by generating new ideas. But yes, fishing skills are the things that are always on the back of my mind.
Surprising that never made it into the IB's framework. I'm sure it's just a matter of time to sneak it in. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much for everyone who's taken part and for anybody who listens back. Hopefully we've given you lots of food for thought. Have a wonderful rest of morning, afternoon, evening, and please look out for the next webinar. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. 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 Bye.